Legendary director and writer Oliver Stone is known for his award-winning movies like Born on the 4th of July, Platoon, and Midnight Express. Over his career, the filmmaker has also interviewed controversial figures like Hugo Chavez and Fidel Castro.
For his latest documentary, The Putin Interviews, Stone was granted extensive access to the Russian president. Stone interviewed Putin more than a dozen times over 2 years. No topic was off limits. In a conversation from February 2016, Stone asked Putin about the candidates in the United States presidential election.
But you do realize how powerful your answer could be if you said subtly that you preferred X candidate. He would go like that tomorrow. And if you say you didn't like Trump or something, right, what would happen? He'd win, right? You have that amount of power in the U.S.
Мы, в отличие от многих наших партнеров, никогда не вмешиваемся во внутриполитические процессы других стран. Это один из принципов нашей работы.
Oliver Stone is with us now in his first television interview about the documentary. Good morning.
Good morning, Charlie.
You had an extensive opportunity to take an evaluation of Vladimir Putin. Former Secretary of Defense Robert Gates once said of him, "When I look at him, I see a cold-blooded killer." When you look at him after these 2 years, what do you see?
You're asking for a full understanding of somebody who I spent 20 hours filming, 20 hours of film. And he reveals himself more in the film than anybody I've ever seen.
And how does
you have to make, I'd like you to be the, you know, if you think he's still a killer after you see these 20 minutes, a cold-blooded one and so forth, that's fine, you know. You draw your own conclusion.
No, I'm talking about what Robert Gates said. I'm not talking about what I said.
Do I agree with Mr. Gates?
Yeah, well, no, what do you see? In other words, that's what Gates saw. What do you see, having spent this time with him?
A statesman who's very concerned with the Russian national interests. He's represented those same interests pretty consistently since about 17 years in power. And he's there to talk. He believes in talk. He believes in peaceful coexistence. He said, in the whole 2 years, I never heard him badmouth anybody. When you know, talking about those candidates, you know, he said very positive things about Hillary Clinton and positive things about Trump, but he displayed any names. He didn't care about who would win. In fact, if you look at the fourth hour, I think you've seen the fourth hour, he says very clearly, you know, the presidents, I've had 4 presidents, the 4 presidents change. The policies remain the same.
You sort of act as if you take what he says as fact.
Well, I mean, I'm in an interview. Why should he lie? You know, I mean, if he is, why should he omit something? I mean,
well, I mean,
I can understand if it's a state secret.
I mean, the clip you just played, unlike many partners of ours, we never interfere with the domestic affairs of other countries. I mean, that's a flat-out lie.
If you say so, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not here to argue with you, but I'm not there to, you know, to make.
Why do you think he granted
judgments on whether they hacked the election or not? It's a complicated issue.
Why do you think he granted you such extensive access? Because you interviewed him over 20 hours.
20 hours of film. It's quite a. I got to know him in the Snowden movie because I was interviewing Snowden in Moscow, and we went over 9 times actually to see Snowden to get the story right. And when I was there, one of those times, I actually met him. I asked him about the Snowden affair. He filled me in. It was quite brilliant about his point of view about it. And we said one thing led to another.
But back to Norah's question, though, Oliver, the access you had, you were in his house. He was driving you around in a car. You went to the gym with him. You sat down and you ate with him. How were you able and allowed to have such access to him?
Maybe I'm a good interviewer. Maybe people like me. You know, Gayle, it's not easy to say. I mean, I think he
Did you just ask him and he said okay?
No, he was inviting us. I think he knew that he'd be heard fairly because I'm not going to be an editor on this thing. I'm going to let him speak. And his point of view is not heard. You don't hear him in Russian in the West.
Right.
You always hear I mean, you hear a dub voice, and sometimes a dub voice can be very harsh.
No, he says his theory of life is summed up in the philosophy of judo, that he's taken judo since he was 11.
Yeah.
Be flexible, be disciplined. Is that what you found him to be? Disciplined
Totally,
and fair?
I never saw, I mean, he works out every day.
Yeah, I saw that.
And he learned hockey at 62 or something like that. He's playing now 2 years later. He's a sportsman, but he's disciplined and flexible at the same time. That's what judo taught him. Never saw him lose his cool with us. I mean, a few times I pushed him, more than once, and I saw him get rattled and upset. But, you know, I have to continue this relationship. It's in my interest to encourage him to speak. So Charlie did one with him too, which I
Yeah.
think was very effective.
Yeah.
Thank you. I asked him a number of things, including whether he is a czar. It's like President Obama once said about him, there's hardly anything that goes on in Russia that he doesn't know about or is not responsible for.
I'm not sure about that, Charlie. You know, Russia's a huge country with 11 time zones. There's an old saying, you know, the czar's acts were able to be executed, about 1/3 of them were. You know, by the time it gets down to the province level and the village level, Moscow's a long way away.
U.S. intelligence agencies believe that, in fact, Russia did meddle. He's alluded to it, said it might not have been the country, but somebody in Russia might have done
Patriot,
it.
yeah.
A patriot might have done it. Don't you, having talked to him, having made a measurement of the man, and being in Russia, have some sense of, and knowing America well, have some sense of whether the Russians meddled in the election?
I don't know, Charlie. You know, why would they? I mean, there's, you know, Ms. Clinton is way in the lead. You know, why would you even take the position that Trump is going to be your candidate? He didn't look like he was going to win. That was quite a shock. You know, I'm of the belief that she did not win. She did not run a very good campaign. Mm-hmm. And you know, there were a lot of on the footprints, on the digital footprints. There's a lot of confusion. The intel agencies people. That was not an estimate. That was an assessment.
Well, Oliver,
But just to clarify, it is the consensus of all U.S. intelligence agencies that they attempted to meddle in the election. It is not the consensus that they influenced the outcome, which I think is
Okay.
there's no okay. So those are two
different
separate things, right? Those are two separate things. Can I ask you though, because the Russians are involved in not only meddling in foreign countries, but they're involved in propaganda efforts as well. Foreign Policy wrote of your documentary, it somehow manages to both spout the Kremlin line and fall back on the laziest American cliches about Russia. Another said you gave him a love letter to Vladimir Putin with this documentary.
An
love
irresponsible love letter.
You catch more. Your mom used to tell me, you know, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. Mm-hmm. And my camera was on him for. We're on 20 hours, over 4 visits. There's a certain behavior. It's in the eyes, it's in the body language, and you see it, and you be the judge. If you think he's lying,
Well, I think the most important thing we can say about this is, first of all, he's an interesting figure on the world stage today, number one. Number two, whatever else he is, he's a strong nationalist. I mean, he believes in Russia, and some say wants to have influence beyond Russia. Thank you.
And I do think you give us an extended glimpse that we would not see of him in such an extended
no, we can only
way.
learn from this.
Different settings. Yeah.
And he wants to be our partner. He said very positive things about the United States. He talks about the partnership. It's been a long time. He knows the presidents. We should listen.
Thanks,
It's
Oliver.
fascinating, Oliver.
Thank you. Thank you
The
for
Putin
having me.
Interviews premieres tonight on Showtime, a division of CBS.